Good morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our global talk today that's going to be given by Kalpana. Before I introduce Kalpana, let me just do a territorial acknowledgement. So we acknowledge with respect for the Tongan peoples, that's the Songhees and Esquimalt peoples on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, as well as the Tongan and Wasanish peoples whose historical relationship with these lands continue to this day. So many of you know Kalpana already. She is here host of the Center for Global Studies. Kalpana Jha is a big graduate student. She's also the author of the Madesi Upsurge and the Contested Idea of Nepal. She's a board member of the Nepal Policy Institute, which I'd like to actually hear more about in our coffee time about this international think tank. She's an alumni as well as a former research fellow from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, India. And she seeks in her research to trace what kind of networks exist, but also how these networks function in determining the nature and the openness of borders. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to you and got your projector. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for the wonderful introduction. The topic for today's talk is cross-border networks and assemblage of borders, rivers, and communities. This is just a small portion of my thesis that I'm working on for my PhD. Here, although my work is comparative, here I'm only presenting some findings from my fieldwork from Nepal and India. So, can I please? This border here is an assemblage of 3 rivers, one seasonal, one man-made, or as the community likes to call it, a seepage of the major transboundary river, and 2 border roads running parallel to the border, Indo-Nepal border trail on the Indian side and the Kunoli road on the Nepali side. And nonetheless, the community straddling the border and crossing for various different reasons. And also the state seems to be neatly embedded in the border through its checkposts and security forces. And this is the overview of the area I'm working on, with the major transboundary river over there and the communities neatly situated around it. And my research questions are, so what does the interaction at the border region play in the process of border formation? Considering the nature of the border as simultaneously regulatory and restrictive, how do borderland communities determine the flow of local strategies and practices into and out of state control? My thesis statement is Global Construction of the Global Order, where I argue that borderlands are a rhizomatic assemblage of actors, infrastructures, and institutions where local networks actively reshape the global order rather than simply being governed by it. My research framework, like I explained, comprises of my thesis statement. I study local cross-border networks and trace bordering processes through it. I use network analysis as my method. I look very closely into social relationships, cultural dimensions, individual influences, and institutional dynamics. The theoretical framework comprises of the assemblage theory, because that helps me understand the world not just made up of stable structures or entities, but is constantly forming and reforming networks of diverse elements whose interactions create temporary coherences always open to transformation. The rhizome further helps me understand the multiplicity inherent in this world that we live in, that also is defined by the movement and connection, a way of thinking beyond hierarchies, origins, and fixed identities. the philosophy of becoming and interconnection rather than being and structures. So more fluid and mobile than rather static in its formation. Feminist geopolitics further helps me situate and link the intimate and the global and shows the power operates not only through states but also through bodies, emotions, and everyday life. This becomes primarily important because I look at gendered perspectives of the borders and lives that are inherent within the borderlands through women's lenses, which gives us a structurally different image of how women look at the borders and their own existence on the borders. And then comes the liminal space. This interaction over here is what constitutes the liminal space and provides the third space the meaning and constructs the border as a third space of lived realities and plural sovereignties, but also I look at it as rather extended sovereignties embodied in people, which stretches as they move across the border. Which is again anchored within critical border studies that reimagines borders by centering the experiences of those who live and move across the border. My entry point into the field, the area that I just introduced, was this consortium, which is defined by the people involved in the consortium as a loose network of civil society organizations and individuals that came together to discuss some of the key issues of flood and the impact that it has on lives of people in the region. So the questions are, what are the issues facing cross-border communities vis-a-vis the seasonal floods, which are massive, by the way. It creates a real big issue, inundating cultivable lands and people's houses. How can the communities in Nepal and India come together to resolve the issues that have emerged? Multiple discussions were held by this group across the border in Nepal and India. Later, the Khado project, which is actually the government-led project in Nepal, and the Koshi project in India, which is an age-old project that has existed since 1960s in India, took over dealing with the flood issue through construction of dams, where the consortium does not anymore exist in its original form, however. And this consortium was also important because the flood had created clashes among the local communities in 2016. And the clash was literally physical and people were injured. And this was over construction of a temporary dam on the Indian side of the border, which would have let the water move backwards into Nepal, inundating communities in Nepal. And when it was moving into India, it was inundating cultivable lands and some parts of communities in India. So there was a clash over there. And the Koshi Consortium was actually formed to deal with this issue, which still kind of lingers within the community, and they do not like to talk about it. It's a matter of shame for both the communities in terms of whatever unfolded based on the flood. However, although the consortium does not exist, now the network has moved into connecting individuals to lobby for the cause of the flood and the construction of the dam. And this kind of, I went into tracing this, and this is what comes across. People leverage their personal contacts across the border to lobby for the dam construction further. What this figure is a sociogram that maps the social relationship among actors across Nepal and India border. Each node represents an individual, and the connection represents different type of ties, such as kinship, friendship, and acquaintance. The network shows a dense central cluster where actors are highly connected and act as bridges within the network. This pattern suggests that the cross-border interactions are sustained primarily through clustered informal social networks. Several of the actors who were involved in the Koshi Consortium are also a part of this, but now not in that form in which it was conceived, but rather a scattered form, yet like they come together for advocating for the given cause, which is the flood, which continues to be the case right now. The several peripheral actors and isolated pairs remain less integrated, and these are all women. All those actors outside this are women. Here, if you look at it, people refer to their connections as somebody they know. So the idea of knowing each other becomes very important here, which is not just knowing, but rather an everyday intimate network of familiarity. So it's beyond just acquaintance and somewhat also more than friendship. So it represents a long-term social familiarity that emerged through everyday coexistence in the borderlands. Many of these ties entail years, sometimes decades of association, built through growing up in the same locality, engaging in casual conversations, and participating in shared social spaces. Such interactions create friendly and trusting relationships, almost like an extended kinship. Another important and interesting dynamic that emerged within this sort of a network is the caste affiliations. So if people knew somebody from their own caste group, they were more interactive with them. And if there was some sort of affiliation that could activate the lobby in a more positive way, they would be more inclined to interacting with them. And this shapes patterns of trust, obligation, and mutual recognition. The social affiliation often structure how people interact, collaborate, and exchange information. So within the caste groups, the exchange of information was more frequent, but also stronger. And extended kin-like relations can sometimes cut across these caste lines, depending on how long people have known each other and how long they've shared the common space. These relationships reflect what can be called everyday intimacy of place. Simply encountering each other regularly in daily life creates a familiarity that sustains social networks over time. And this network has a strength of its own because they were able to do was get this particular map passed, which includes the dam construction project that is being executed at the border. So initially, when this dam was conceived by the government officials, there was no connecting bridges in that dam. However, with the lobby of the local groups, they've managed to create two bridges that help people cross the border from 2 points, which are more convenient. Otherwise, they would have to go around the place to cross the border, which makes it inconvenient to cross the border. And crossing the border is more like an everyday activity. People do it for fun. People go and see their families across the border, have a cup of tea, discuss about random things. And that's how the borderland is actually looked at, and that is how it's lived on an everyday basis by people. So this was an important lobby that they created. And in fact, also this dam construction has been activated by mostly men in the community, as by also the other network that I showed you was primarily men and their affiliations that is acting around how the dam should be constructed and how it will not create further problem among the community. Also, this interdependence that I look at here is also primarily dominated by how men conceive of the cross-border relations. It looks transactional, but it has a thing of intimacy within it. So many of us, I was interacting on the Indian side of the border, And somebody pointed this out that many of us wouldn't have been alive today had it not been for Nepal. Snake bites were so common, and Rajbiraj was our only hope, which is the nearest town in Nepal for the Indian community living over there. Even today, for immediate medical assistance, we rely on Rajbiraj because of its proximity. Darbhanga, which is the closest city in India, is further away from this borderland community, and they see it as a long commute. Further, in Nepal, people rely for medical treatment in this major city in Darbhanga because the hospitals there are good and they have families over there, which makes it more convenient and cheaper for them to get medical treatment in India rather than going to the nearest city in Nepal, which is Biratnagar or Kathmandu, the capital city. Most of my good customers are from Nepal. My business thrives because of them. Is one also a businessman and a very strong lobbyist within the making of the dam and the whole lobbying around how the river should be managed. This guy says that his business thrives mostly on Nepali customers. It's not necessarily the local customers. We rely on Indian market for cheaper goods. This was mostly by the people who lived across the border in Nepal who move into India for a daily shopping because goods are cheaper. And there's a larger aspect to this that goods, when brought from India, are supposed to be custom cleared on the Nepali border, but then there is this loophole that is practiced on a daily basis where people are allowed to carry some amount of goods primarily on the discretion of the customs officer at the border, and not in the national picture. So it's actually the customs officials that are giving that leverage in terms of taking goods back and forth for the people for daily consumption. And also on sugar, again, totally on the discretion of the customs officers. They only charge 20% tax, and they do not charge the 100% of the tax that's supposed to be charged on sugar primarily. Also, one of the journalists, when I was talking, he is a Nepali journalist, and his channel is apparently listened to by Indians. And he defined his community not as neatly defined by the border on the ground, but rather by the people who listen to this channel, which is across the border. So that entire group comprises a community for him. And most of his advertisements also came from across the border in India. The reason why I brought in women is because of this, the bond of bread and daughter, which is very latent in the community. If you talk to the community members, they do not really always use this phrase to define their relationships across the border because it's mostly understood as the relationship that has been there, and it's mostly taken as something that's present within everyday communications. It's foundational to sustaining these transboundary networks. These networks that these men are able to carve out is primarily through the marital relationships that they share across the border. That is what helps in constructing the larger knowing within the communities. When they cross across the border to visit families is when they create this sort of alliances with also other people living around in the communities, which creates also a sense of extended neighborhood and family across the border. However, the women did not see themselves within this idiom of the roti beti ka rishta, or the bond of bread and daughter. It is sustained through women, but not by the women. It is sustained by men in a way. And we don't find ourselves anywhere in Roti Beti Ka Rishta. And primarily for women in Nepal who are either married from India into Nepal or married from Nepal into India, the struggle for citizenship becomes real. And the struggle for recognition becomes real because there are these transactional elements or objects that are traded across border in marriages, but they do not determine the kind of relationship that is going to be shared beyond that. at the cross-border level. Even in terms of citizenships, there were women who were struggling, whose either their husbands passed or something happened and they had to come back to Nepal with their children, and they were denied citizenship based on the fact that they were married to an Indian national. Also, the women who were married into Nepal from India, if their husbands had passed away or left them without giving them a citizenship prior to leaving them, it would be a struggle for them to acquire citizenship without an explicit recognition from the husband or the husband's family. So the women somewhere who are carrying across these borders into their bodies are left outside the whole idea of the nation itself. However, they're not really voiceless or suppressed all the time. They do have a view, which I shall share in a bit. Interestingly, while the communities did not really allude to this idiom itself all the time, because for them it was more understood and lived and exercised, because they always crossed the border to see their families. But it was mostly alluded by the security officials and also government officials. They were very quick to bring this everyday kinship relationship and cross-border marital relationships as now India also is trying to control the border more and more and setting the tone at the border through construction of dams, through construction of checkposts, and explicitly kind of exercising securitization at India-Nepal border, which wasn't the case even until COVID before 2020. So this came to be after 2021 very blatantly. So the security framework, as it changes, it reveals that this idiom of roti beti ka rishta functions less as lived social practice and more as a discursive softener, masking hard territorial controls under the language of familial intimacy and civilizational proximity. Securitization at India-Nepal border does not erase social ties. It appropriates them, inflating intimacy, gendered relations, and everyday life into the governance of territory and security. So they kind of exercise the securitization through appropriating this relationship where they constantly allude to it. Even the officials, the bureaucrats who are outside the security but work in the project offices, which is the Koshi project office. One of such officials was very quick to jump back and forth as he said, as we construct the dam, we will have full control over the no man's land. And the river itself will be diverted and will be joined into another river that flows into India and which will be leveraged for hydropower and agriculture. And he explicitly mentioned how that is going to give them, and it will be under their control, and therefore because the security will also be providing security to that dam will be their primary task. So taking control over it. However, again, he moved back immediately and said, we share a very sweet relationship with Nepal where Nepalese first don't agree to certain things, but then they will come by, and we know that. So it was a very interesting sort of controlling of the river, building of dam, and embedding it into the social relationship that exists. And the security officials kind of also merge into that narrative because providing security again of that infrastructure that is going to be created over there is their responsibility. So it's very important that they keep the social relationship alive in the discourse, but not in the real life, really. It's going to first impact this kind of relationship. And here, as I spoke to women, I had to be very intentional in terms of going and speaking to women because women naturally did not emerge into the networks I was actually exploring, because it was very dominated by men. Here, we were talking about the river. That is one of the major resources there, and there is a constant tension between Nepal and India over the exercising the control over this river. And the women were, the way the women defined the river was Koshi is powerful. There's no one more powerful than her. When she swells to her full strength, which means in the flood seasons, when in the rainy seasons, you must see what she looks like. Rich or poor, small or big, everybody is the same to her. She's our mother. We live in her lap. She's the Maharani or the Empress. She rules, but also she's the provider of life. She's given us in abundance. Nepal is Koshi's maternal home, and India is her marital home. Well, she is born in Nepal, and she flows into India to meet other rivers like Ganges, and it goes and kind of makes its way into the ocean in India. So that's where this is coming from. We women share so much in common with Koshi. We flow like her from one country to another and bring life to earth. Women who live along borders, such as those in Kosi River Basin, embody an extended sovereignty in practice. Their ability to traverse and transcend the limits of the state defines their sovereign existence through everyday acts of negotiation, exchange, and care. So it's not like the women are devoid, but it really starkly presents parallel worldviews to me, how women see the river, how the women see themselves being embodied as the river, and also key stakeholders who move across the border back and forth and are actually the explicit reproducers of the nation. And to conclude, borders are often imagined as fixed lines that organize the global order through states, treaties, and institutions. However, the borderlands I study reveal a very different reality. Through everyday social relations, kinship, familiarity, friendship, and long-standing associations, borderland communities create dense networks that sustain cross-border interaction. Borders are not only shaped by states and formal governance structures, but also by localized networks of people whose everyday interactions sustain across cross-border life. Thank you very much.
That's just fascinating research that you're doing. You highlight a lot the gendered element, and I think that's a beautiful approach. Been reading a review recently of published posthumously of James Scott's Liquid Empire, and it's about looking at how humankind sort of messed with river systems as part of our colonial projects, right? And he comes to the conclusion pretty early on, apparently, that it never works messing with rivers. Like it always leads to other problems, right? And so. And the best case scenario, it becomes a never-ending engineering project. And so there's hubris in this idea of messing with the rivers. And if you're in your gendered analysis, the messing with the rivers is this borders, the dynamic between Nepal and India, but it's also pretty exclusionary from the way you make it sound of the women. And the women's perspective about the river doesn't really sound like they want to mess with it from what you're describing. So there's that I'm curious about. But then there's also this interesting ethnic potential line between crossing over between India and Nepal. And I'm wondering, in this region, are people thinking of themselves as linked to this river as their identity, or are they thinking, once I cross to the other side, I'm Indian, or once I cross the other side, I'm Nepali? So two questions in there. One is the gendered on the perception of the river and the dam, and then the other is how does this existence of this border of river and dam hardening or loosening ethnic senses of ethnicity or identity across the border, or is it reinforcing a kind of regional identity?
Oh, I'll answer your second question first because it's the same ethnic community living across the border. So there's no division. Like I said, it's an extended kinship. Families live across the border, and therefore the border makes sense in terms of does not make sense.
Yeah.
Because it's like people live across it. And the crossing itself is like a mundane thing of an everyday life activity. Um, until the border started becoming enforced and the security forces started becoming very explicitly present in that region. So only then have people come to realize that there is something here, that needs to be crossed. Otherwise, that crossing was just an everyday part of life. And that area is defined as a floodplain. So it is a floodplain. That is why people live there because of the immense potential that the area had to cultivate rice. So and the evil started when that major river, the one big one, Koshi River, was dammed. That was when the problem started. Because before that, and activists who are a little older still allude to that as, when the dam wasn't there, the water came in as scattered. It scattered everywhere. So it wasn't that huge deal of a problem. And we were not scared that it'll sweep us out. We knew when to expect the flood, how to navigate it on our own. But once it was dammed, it kind of contained the whole water in one thing. And Koshi being Koshi, it does not follow a trajectory. It has this tendency to breach the dam and flow from entirely somewhere else, which happened in 2008. Like it completely left its course in Nepal and started flowing into India. So that's the nature of the river. It's wild, it's not controllable. And interestingly, the women see it.
Yeah.
The men try to control it. And that's where the binary exists for me. Yeah. Caitlin.
Okay, I gotta sign up this program so you can see me. So my question is gonna be, first of all, it's great to see how this has progressed since the coffee talk. That's it's really moving. Speaking of moving, so I suppose, I don't know, I think I asked in the last one, but is the idea going to be with your quote from the river and the flood to be kind of taking a like Terry and Deleuzian approach to becoming woman, like river as becoming woman?
I really need to think through that. Is it becoming women or has it been conceived as a female body from the very ancient times?
Yeah.
Or she has always been her.
Right,
It's
so
a
anyway,
she.
but there, yes, okay, so, but if you were to apply the theory to it, I guess there's a central tension in it, and so maybe you haven't like really thought this through yet, but it's like, if you're gonna do that and the river, the flood is a kind of a fluid, always becoming, always changing. In the theory itself, there's this kind of anti identity, right? And so how will you navigate the central tension here, and even in your quote, how it's like she's Nepali by maternally and she's Indian by marriage. They're still holding on to some sort of identitarian by their own like cultural norms or whatever. But how will you navigate like sovereignty and the importance in the claim to sovereignty in today's world with this kind of Deleuzian theory of like anti-identity and always becoming, always changing, always fluid. Same with your assemblage theory, like yeah, how will you navigate those two tensions? What people are saying are important to them with what the theory is saying is important to it. So that's my question.
Thank you, Kathleen. I don't know if I have a neat answer to that because for now, I'm just navigating that tension around how women preferred to see it. And like I said, in binary opposition to how men like to see it. So for now, that's my conceptualization. But yeah, I work with assemblage, and yes, it's anti-identity and it's a fluid, and that is why I kind of subscribe to this also in terms of not seeing borders as neatly aligned into the land, and it's never really stretched out or never really redefined, you know. So yeah, maybe in future that may change, you know. There's always, because you don't know, it wasn't dammed like 50 years ago. It was just there, it was flowing, right? But it was dammed later. You don't know if that dam is again going to be removed, and then how that is going to transform the ecology and how people will start thinking about it. But at this point, yeah, I don't think I have a neatly carved answer in terms of how am I going to really look into this tension. But thank you for highlighting it. Maybe, yeah, moving on from her, maybe querying it would be helpful. I don't know. Thanks. Yeah, who was the next? I don't know.
Yeah, my question for your very interesting presentation. I loved it. My question is on your methodology of collecting data, on how you interviewed. Did you interview? Are you gathering like oral history interviews, and do you have any like plan to like maybe archive these interviews or like make a I don't know, maybe some kind of digital archive of these interviews, or do you have any plan in mind? Do you think there's a kind of significance to it to keep these oral histories alive, and maybe I don't know, what you think and how you collected data actually?
Yeah, my data collection was very interesting. So I've already spent many years in this region working before I came to do my PhD. So there's a kind of a familiarity with this place that I have. And I did 4 months of field work in this area. I went and lived there. So the nearest border town, Rajviraj, was where I was located, and I hired a research assistant to ride me across the border on a motorbike. Sometimes like literally going across the border 100 kilometers to get one interview. To the major project office to interview those bureaucrats was a pain. So as of now, where I stand is about 69 in-depth interviews.
Wow.
About 30 intentional but casual interactions as I crossed the border, went in, or when I came back and met somebody in the community while I was moving on the bike, there would be people around and I would stop by to ask them certain things. So that was the approach I took for the qualitative, and there's also a quantitative aspect where I did a survey with individuals. That survey failed. People did not like to put it in survey, but when I asked them about their affiliations across the border in person, talk to them, they would reveal their connections and how that works. However, I also looked into about 22 NGOs that were part of the Koshi consortium across the borders. So there aren't many that are active, although there are about 70 NGOs registered on the Nepali side and 20 on the Indian side. There were about 5 or 6, I'm not sure, I have to see, on the Indian side that are active. And there is about 12, 13 on the Nepali side that are actually active. Also because of the pulling out of funds that has crushed these NGOs down.
By USA?
US aid pulled out its funding, and in India, there is a very conscious effort at killing the NGOs by the state. So it's taking up by sort of the corporate funded some sort of organizations, which is the Ambani group funding these things, which was very interesting again, but that was not part of my research, but that emerged as something interesting to me. So yeah, yes, that was the data collection. Yes, Mac.
Oh, thank you so much, Kalpana. first of all, congratulations for getting to this point. I know it's a hard time to do the field work. So one of my questions was picked up by Activeair. It's about the method. So you do the field work, you do the intent, like in-depth interview. I wonder how interviews can help you map out the network, because network analysis could be either quantitatively or qualitatively, right? I wonder how you balance either of them, or just qualitatively. If just qualitatively, how does it help you map out that network? The second point is related to that is about you talk about the very important point that the network is established over time, right? It takes time for people to interact, and then you can shape, you can capture the network. So my question is, I didn't see, I mean, miss the point, but my point is about the temporality. We need a longitudinal observation to see how the network is established or changed over time. I'm just curious whether how you capture that, and to what extent it's changed, and how interesting in that change you can capture. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, my approach is largely qualitative.
Qualitative, yeah.
So it's not very quantitative approach. And it's also difficult in this kind of region where people are very skeptical in filling out any kind of form.
Yeah.
So when you approach them with a survey, you're met with kind of resistance. They don't like to put it in writing anything. Also, with larger stretched securitization that is happening in the borderlands, people are pretty reserved. So when I go in person and when I talk to them, they do talk to me about relationships. Once they have that trust in me and they know who I am, where I'm coming from, it's easier for them to talk about their relationships because they understand that I will understand how these relationships work. And also, if you look at it, I'm not looking at anything hardbound, a network that is structured. I'm looking at a network that is unstructured here. These individuals that I map in that one network have come together and lobbied, but it's not necessary that when I go back now, right now, at this point of time, when it's about 1 year when I've come back from the field, some of these individuals might have moved out of that structure, and then somebody else might have taken that space.
Yeah.
So that is there. Like I said, the COSI consortium that existed, initially in 2017 when it was conceived, that has changed. Like that consortium does not exist in its original conceptualization, that form in which they had established that network with various NGOs and those stuff. Most of those NGOs don't even exist anymore. But then the individuals within that, and also the individuals who were a part of that consortium, have come together in a very different form, which is personal relationality now, and leveraging that across the border to create a lobby to resolve that problem of flood, which may again result into some sort of a conflict between the communities. And they very well recognize that it's not going to be a good situation for them. It's not a good thing to be conflicting with your neighbor all the time, right? It does not show you in a good light. So I think, I don't know how far I've covered your question. So yeah, so the temporality can be seen over there, that very change that I've captured, but it's mostly qualitatively. It's very difficult to go and map that quantitatively.
So then, could I say it's just a one-shot capture within the network?
Yes, for now, yes.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you. Yeah.
You might want to take one from sorry, yeah. There's one from
Davina had raised a question.
Come back to the room.
Davina, do you want to come on and read your question, or do you want us to read it for you?
Sure. Sorry. Yeah, I was just wondering, Kalpana, I really appreciated the overview of the work that you gave today, and it's wonderful to see how this project is developing. I I was really struck by the way you talked about the appropriation of the intimacies that you described by the state actors. And I'm wondering if you could maybe just expand a bit about that, a bit more about how you might be seeing states in this way.
Well, thank you, Davina. I love doing that actually. Looking at that aspect is my favorite part. For now, the way I see is while India is securitizing the border, it is actually setting the agenda for it. Nepal does not necessarily explicitly control the border in any way. It kind of manages India's interest at this point of time at the border. So, what Nepal has done primarily, while in India, it's in the rhetorics, it's in the discourse that they love to use roti beti ka rishta to kind of just manage that hard bordering under the soft logics of relationships, but don't really value it that much. And as far as my observation goes, would love to break that, because right now what they're doing is when the marriage processions come from India to Nepal or Nepal to India, it is primarily the Indian border officials that stop them at the border and get them to linger over there for hours unless each and every individual had supplied with an ID card, which could be an Indian Aadhaar card or a Nepali citizenship, and prove that they are, and they need to carry the wedding card, and they need to be convinced that the guy is the groom or the girl is the bride. So that thing is happening, and very fortunately, I was able to observe that there was a procession that was coming and that was being held at the border by the security officials. And in Nepal, it's very interesting that they control the citizenship against women. They will hold the citizenship, and women are not allowed to transfer their citizenship either to their children or to their spouse. So it's a very strategic dispossession of women that Nepal exercises through citizenship. And it kind of pushes the women to the margins and, in a way, effectively towards borders. If I'm to talk about the cases that I saw at that point of time, was like these women who are married across the border are forced to navigate life across the borders. But if a woman married to an Indian man, it's somehow choosing to come back to her maternal home and make a life here, the officials will make sure that this woman or her children never receive a citizenship. And it is so primary to have a citizenship in Nepal that you're not even given a phone connection without citizenship, like that chip, the SIM card is dependent on having a citizenship. So it's that basic for them. So it's a very hard situation. Similarly, for women who are married from India into Nepal, and somehow, if their husbands are no more present in their life, and are forced to move back to India, it's the similar problem that they will not be given citizenship in Nepal, and therefore the children are pretty much stranded. Like they cannot claim property, and the social realities hit in terms of even Indian women in that part, at least in the borderlands, are basically never completely owned by their own families. So the families don't want to provide them with the Aadhaar card, because then she will become a legal claimant of the ancestral property, and which the brothers or the family does not want to do. So they are kind of stranded in between these spaces where they need to navigate both sides, both worlds, but are dispossessed effectively by both the states. So yeah, that's how. However, they love to talk about roti beti ka rishta all the time.
Thanks for that, Kalpana.
So
Go ahead.
I loved your use of assemblage theory. It was just so well suited to your project, and combining it with feminist analysis. I'm super interested to ask you more about that another time, but I actually had a similar question is odd to you, but have you considered, or in the scope of your project, using like autoethnography to talk about your own experiences of like, of doing your research, of doing your field research, or finding another outlet like nonfiction writing? My point, like at the bottom, what I'm saying is, I would love to read your own perspective on the things that you've been through. And there's been so much scholarly like movement lately toward interest in like the process, like as it's happening, and kind of the merits of giving them behind the scenes look. So I guess I just wanted to know your feelings on something like that.
Thank you. That idea was not even on the back of my mind, but thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, the experiences are pretty strong, pretty personal. When you're in the field, it's hard not to see yourself within it. I come from that context. I belong to it in one way or the other. So yeah, definitely. I mean, I shall try in the future, but as for my PhD, that's not possible. So yeah, maybe sometime in the future after I'm done.
That into your PhD.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah, if you ever read it, let me know.
Sarah's your first reader. Absolutely done.
I have a question for you, Kalpana. I'm curious about the role, a little bit more about the role of the border guards, because can you help me understand? Because they're not really isolated in the community either. So they represent the state, but they're also married and they have families and they cross borders. So does that kind of influence that sort of connection with the kinship groups, or can there be the women that are married to these men? Are they also kind of having influence on who they let across, how that works, that kind of thing?
That's an interesting question. It has the security officials being posted on the borderlands are interestingly not from the borderlands. The state somehow ensures, on the Nepali side, you would still find some people who belong to the borderlands because it's not very strictly strategized on the Nepali end, the security officials.
Okay.
But on the Indian side, if you looked at it about 10 years ago when they first started posting those officials, they didn't even speak the local language. Because of which there was a lot of tension that was emerging on the borderland. Like people were used to carrying these goods, going for shopping, visiting families, and even carrying like, a sack of mango because that was there in their family. So, they would just bring it. It's not commercial, but just to bring it home, something. And the border officials started really intervening into that daily life, and they didn't speak the language, so people could not explain, that, it's just familial. I'm not carrying anything illegal, or this is not illegal. So when those tensions emerged, they at least started posting officials who understood the local language or could speak Hindi. So right now, if you see, most of these officials are posted from the northern states of India, but not necessarily from the borderlands itself. And like I said, and it's profound because it is the Indian security officials who are guarding the border primarily. On the Nepali end, it's mostly secondary security force presence, and that does not really affect the cross-border marriages, therefore exists in kind of a different space from these security officials. Maybe some of them may be able to understand, but the way security and tightening is being understood and redefined in the Indian state is also around containing terrorism, against containing drug peddling. So they are very much kind of trained into that. So although they are also told that, not to really meddle too strongly with the daily lives. However, for instance, if I'm a Nepali national or an Indian national trying to cross the border and I forgot my ID card, for instance, because I'm not used to it, right? It's just new thing that is coming into practice. And I'm just used to carrying my bag and going to my sister's home for a visit. So in that case, what they would do is hold you. They won't necessarily not let you cross, but they will hold you. And it could be up to hours that the officials hold you there and like go through everything that you're carrying, ask you many questions, let everybody else who has the documents pass, and then maybe later in the day they will let you pass. And then when you're going back, it's the same sort of a problem. So it's not really the security officials are functioning in a different space.
That's interesting too, how you said that they, like over time, things changed a little bit and they kind of adapted to that situation because they're getting used to the norms of the area and even if in just a slight way, it's kind of,
In a very controlled way. I would
Yeah.
say in a very
very like no drugs coming in kind of way. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Kalpana.
Definitely it does. And it happens openly.
There's
Thanks so much for your presentation. It's been fascinating, and I just want to acknowledge how much work it sounds like you have done. And in the interest of a great PhD being a done PhD,
You need a bumper sticker.
where are you writing 3 separate articles, or how are you getting from where you are in this rich center of all this data experience to
I am thinking articles and I'm looking at Emmanuel right now. So one of my article is the question that Caitlin has raised and looking into this binary conceptualization of state, rivers, borders. So I am doing that. A few other are also materializing. So I believe I will be doing chapters as individual articles and not.
And to graduate, she needs 2 submitted. They don't have to be approved, but they have to be ready to be submitted. And 1 drafted, and she'll be way beyond. She'll probably publish 1 or 2 and have 1 in submission. So it's the same system for all my students. They can do whatever they want. But there are some guidelines that are set in the school, and the school doesn't require a published paper. I just push them to do it, so they go through the process once. Kalpana, however, has some experience in that regard because she's already written a book.
yeah. Well,
And she has presented many papers at many conferences, like actually most PhD students. So
no, I asked that because
it's a very good question.
I thought I would do articles and I ended up doing a manuscript. I think I had 34 in-depth interviews for one of what ended up becoming a chapter, but I thought it was an article. And I realized that the most direct path to done was actually a manuscript because I couldn't parse out what I wanted to into 3 separate. I needed 2, I had 1 already. And so I'm just asking this to prompt you to think about what that looks like. And I think for public domain, you can do a manuscript if you want to, right?
You can do
Yeah.
that.
Anyway, I was trying to force a huge amount of data into I had 1, so I was trying to force it into 2 articles, and I just could not narrow the scope enough to say what I needed to say. And I lost so much time trying to narrow that scope and trying to mold it into an article when it didn't. It was too much for that. So just putting that on the table as you think from getting where you are to done. Just throwing it out there.
Thank
It sounds like you've done an enormous amount of work.
Now, the next case study is here, right?
Yeah, 2 case studies in Cascadia actually that I've recently figured out.
Well, wait, sorry, you're also doing 2 case
Yeah.
studies here?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
With the border.
So you don't care about
Based
that.
on your presentation. Dissertation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but actually I'm doing a comparative work, so I have 2 more. Yeah.
Someone took a ruler.
Well, I think it will not take so much time because I've already figured out what I'm gonna do. It will start in April. It might take a couple of months after that to collect the data and then putting it in writing after that.
Can you tell us what the case studies are? I'm super curious. Cascadia, but like what?
Well, for now,
Big space.
I came across one that is.
Hmm.
Well, I definitely wanted to look at Columbia River Treaty
Oh, wow.
and the interactions
No
around that. And Nepal. So, but yeah, I will kind of slowly parse that out.
Okay.
I'm still thinking.
I'm very much living that experience. I don't have a motorbike that goes across the border.
I wish you had included that photo.
Oh yeah, I have
Next
one,
time.
but no. Oh.
So thank you, Kalpana. I think we'll continue to discuss your project and reflect on it. And we're just so happy to have you in the hallways of CFTS.
Thank you.
Thank you.